Hey there, Pasta people, your perfect nightmare here. So first off, I'd like to wish a very, very, very belated happy birthday to my good friend the Hyron Project. I'm sorry it took so long. He asked me to narrate this for his birthday months ago, but seeing as it's the longest pasta I've ever narrated and the longest video I've ever put together, I really hadn't been able to find the time until now. But it's finally done! Yay, so excited! Moving on, second order of business. I wanted to let everyone know that I did a gender swap in this pasta. In other words, I made the main character, James, into a female named Jamie, and I changed all the gender-related aspects. I did this because I've gotten a few comments on Can You Help Me Find My Cat, saying that it's weird hearing a guy's perspective read by a female. So I'd love to know what you guys think. Do you think I should change the gender to fit my narrations as long as it isn't an essential aspect of the story? Or should I stay true to the original, and if someone doesn't like that I'm female, they can deal with it? I just don't want my narrations to be limited just because I'm female. Anyways, I really hope you guys enjoy this pasta, and until next week, I'll see you in your nightmares.
Those who dream by day are cognizant of many things that escape those who dream only at night. Edgar Allan Poe, Eleonora. Go to bed and wait for the Sandman. Even as it came out of Jamie's mouth, it seemed to her a strange thing to say, and she was not sure why she had, but for some reason it worked. Daniel went to bed. The next morning, though, he asked, "What does the Sandman look like?" Jamie was making breakfast. Daniel sat at the table, short legs swinging under his chair. "Nothing really," Jamie said. "It's just an expression." "What does it mean?" "It's just something people say." She put a plate of eggs in front of Daniel and kissed him on the top of his head. She thought that would be the end of it, until she saw the Sandman for herself. She was getting ready for bed and stopped by Daniel's room to check on him while he slept, as she often did. It was such a routine precaution that when she saw a pale, naked man sitting on the edge of Daniel's bed, rocking back and forth, it took a moment for her to process what she was seeing. She reacted the way any mother would, of course. She ran into the room screaming, and for a moment she thought about attacking the intruder. But then the man on the bed turned, and that's when Jamie saw that it wasn't really a man. It was a pale, slithery thing, hairless and warped. Its joints turned the wrong way, and its body out of shape with itself. When it moved, it was like an insane marionette dancing on a stage. Jamie froze. The skittering thing watched her. She felt spreading warmth and realized that she'd pissed her pants. Only when she remembered that Daniel was still sitting there in bed, staring at the broken-shaped thing sitting a foot away, did she regain the courage to move. She grabbed Daniel and ran. In the hall, she turned to see if the thing would follow them, but it didn't. For a moment, it watched, and then, moving like a stop-motion nightmare, it crawled to the window and jumped out, leaving only the billowing curtains to mark its passing. Jamie had trouble talking to the police. She reported a break-in, but when asked to describe the intruder, she didn't know what to say. How could she make the ordinary man in the blue uniform sitting at her kitchen table while two of his colleagues searched the house understand a thing like she'd seen? She couldn't even understand it herself. To make it worse, Daniel's memory did not correspond to Jamie's. He described an ordinary-looking burglar. "A man in a mask," he said. Jamie thought about it. Had it been a mask? No, it would had to have been a full costume, and an elaborate one, something like they would use for a movie. And that would not explain the way it moved. But in the end, she simply echoed her son's testimony. "A man in a mask," she said. "A burglar." The lie unsettled her almost as much as what had happened. The doctor said Daniel wasn't hurt and showed no signs of molestation. Jamie was relieved. They stayed at a motel for a couple of nights until they felt ready to come home. And then Jamie had a new security system installed, along with bars on the windows. She didn't like the sight of them in Daniel's room, but it seemed like the only thing to do. Jamie was frightened that first night back in the house, but Daniel, strangely, was not. When asked if he felt okay sleeping alone, he just said yes. In the end, it was Jamie who found herself wishing she were not sleeping alone. She was up all night, listening for the sound of anything to move in the house. Although she had convinced herself that her memory was faulty, and that it had been a normal, albeit probably deeply disturbed, man in her son's room, when she closed her eyes for even a moment, she pictured bloodless skin and a twisted, inhuman face. She found herself wondering, why my house? Why my family? She knew, of course, that there didn't have to be a reason, but still, she wondered. 2 weeks later, Daniel stopped talking. Jamie didn't notice at first. Kids went through quiet phases sometimes, but eventually, she tried to get Daniel to talk, and he wouldn't. Eventually, it became clear that he couldn't. Back to the doctor they went. "There's nothing wrong with him that we can see," was the diagnosis. "Was it the trauma?" Jamie asked. "Could be," they said. "Sometimes these things come on late. Children can be a mystery even to those who know them best." They recommended a child psychologist, whom Jamie couldn't afford. She couldn't, for that matter, even afford the bill they were giving her now. Nothing seemed to help. Daniel would write out answers to questions sometimes, but never more than a yes or no. When Jamie would ask him what was wrong, or if he'd seen or heard anything that frightened him, Daniel would only stare. He seemed furtive and bemused. Jamie found herself missing the sound of her son's voice. Sometimes she wanted to hear it so bad that she ached, but it seemed that Daniel would not talk again until he was ready. Jamie had other things to worry about too. She was convinced beyond reason that the intruder was not really gone. Though the alarm never went off and the locks and bars remained undisturbed, she was sure that she heard movement in the night. Not normal movement. It was a sound like a huge snake slithering through the house. When she heard it, she imagined horrible things. Nothing was ever there when she went to investigate, though she often thought she glimpsed something just out of the corner of her eye. A pale foot or a misshapen shadow that would slink away as soon as she turned. She rarely slept, and when she did, she had haunted dreams. Soon, she realized she had not left the house in weeks, except to go to the bank and buy groceries. She felt hemmed in. With Daniel acting mute, she hadn't had an actual conversation with anyone in weeks. So she called her mother. The connection was bad, and her voice sounded faint, on the verge of not being there at all. "I guess I'm okay, Ma," she said, pausing to wipe the sweat from her palms and make sure she could hear Daniel playing in the next room. "But things have been a little rough. We had a break-in."
"Oh, how awful,"
Mom said.
"Did they take anything?"
"Nah, just ran off. It was weird, though. I haven't really felt comfortable since then."
"Are you still working at that hospital?"
"No, Ma. I left last year. You know that."
"Oh, well, have you been going out? What about that nice man you were seeing last year? The one who played the piano?"
Jamie scowled. She was always asking that kind of thing. Didn't she know how hard it was being a single mother? That she didn't have the time? She was about to say so when something made her pause. "Ma, is there anyone else on the line?"
"I don't think so."
Jamie was sure she heard it, though. The short, gasping sound of someone trying to hold their breath and failing. A cold feeling crept across the back of her neck. "You sure nobody's listening on your other phone?"
"Dear, there is no other phone. I'm on my cell. That's why the service is so bad."
"Then what is—" Jamie stopped. If the sound wasn't coming from her end, then... She dropped the phone and raced to the hall. The extension hung on its hook, undisturbed. Heart pounding, she hurtled into the garage. The spare phone sat on the workbench. No one was in sight. But could they have been? Could someone have been there all along, listening to her phone call, and then slithered away? Might they be here even now? The next day, she took out the extra phone extensions. She even filled in the jacks with rubber cement. Daniel watched her work, eyes curious, but Jamie offered no explanation. She began giving Daniel a light physical exam every week. Her CNA training was a little rusty after a year on disability, but you never really forget. It was an absurd thing to do, of course. Even if there was a physical cause for Daniel's behavior, It would be nothing she could discover this way, and she was aware on some level that it was compulsive behavior. Nevertheless, it made her feel better. One morning, Jamie set the diaphragm of the stethoscope against Daniel's chest, but she could not locate a heartbeat. She moved her hand in search of the right spot, to no avail. Then, to test it, she listened to her own heartbeat. It came through steady and clear, but when she checked Daniel again, she didn't hear anything. A thought came unbidden to her of the Tin Man in Wizard of Oz, whose chest was empty as a kettle. A sick feeling roiled her stomach. She threw the stethoscope down and grabbed Daniel by the shoulders, looking into his face. Daniel stared back with bright eyes. He even smiled a little with the corners of his mouth. Jamie felt the tingle of tears. She swept her son up into her arms and hugged him, and Daniel hugged back. Then Jamie put his shirt back on and sent him to play. The stethoscope, she decided, was broken. She threw it in the trash. Things got worse. Jamie's terrors were no longer relegated to the long hours of the night. Now it seemed that some creeping, some skittering and scuttling, some unknowable noise in some dark corner or another filled every second of her day. The thought of how big the house really was started to weigh on her. There were so many rooms she wasn't in at any given time. So many places someone or something else could be. She imagined strange figures occupying the rest of her home when she wasn't around, melting into the walls or merging with the shadows whenever she turned on a light or opened a door. How would she know if they were there? How would she ever know? Soon, she didn't even have to be outside a room to imagine it. When she walked up the stairs, she pictured a pale figure lurking beneath them. When she went down the hall, she pictured a crawling thing slithering behind the walls, shadowing her every step. If she sat too long in the same chair, she imagined it was right behind her. And she was never comforted when she turned around and found nothing there, as she could only guess that meant it had moved, swiftly and silently, behind her once again. Wherever she was not looking right now, that was where she imagined it to be. She knew she was losing her mind. The only thing that helped her cling to sanity was that Daniel seemed undisturbed. Other than his muteness, his behavior was perfectly normal, and whenever he seemed to sense his mother was troubled, he would hug her, or squeeze her hand, or even smile. Sometimes, when he left the room, Jamie cried. One night, she found herself creeping around the house with no lights on at 2 o'clock in the morning. If the intruding thing had taken to violating her daytime activities, then she would get revenge by confronting it on its own terms, the night. And really, night was no more frightening to her now than day. They were almost interchangeable. She padded barefoot down the halls, up the stairs, in and out of disused rooms. Sometimes she stopped to listen, hoping to locate it by sound. It was a stealthy, creeping thing, she knew, but it was awkward at times, and it couldn't always keep its strangely shaped limbs from making their distinct, irregular footsteps. The smallest noise would give it away. There was one room she suspected it spent most of its time in. The spare bedroom. Not a bedroom at all, really. More like a closet, just large enough to accommodate a bed if one were so inclined. It was unpainted, uncarpeted, and drafty. She'd always meant to fix it up. She didn't come in here very often, because she disliked the bare, unused look of it. It made her think of a partially dissected corpse. She came in now, though. If the thing made its nest in any one place in the house, this would be it. Of course, there was nothing there now, but that didn't mean there was nothing there at all. She cursed, running a hand through her sweat-damp hair. What was she missing? How did it hide from her? What was its secret? She peered into the room's empty corners, one by one, getting her face a few inches from the plaster and floorboards so that she could be certain that there was no space for it to conceal itself. The light bulb flickered. She froze. My God, she thought. It's on the ceiling! She pictured it crawling above her like a huge, pale lizard. That's how it gets around, she thought. That's how it escapes. Any time I should have it cornered. It just scuttles up the wall and hides right over my head. She imagined it dangling down behind her like a spider. If I turn around, she thought, it will be there, hanging with its face right next to mine. She held her breath. She didn't want to turn around, but she had no choice. It was between her and the door. With a quiet sob, she ran on her heels. Of course, she was alone. There was no man on the ceiling. She checked twice. Maybe it crawled out and was waiting for her in the hall. But when she checked there, the coast was once again clear. It should have been a relief, but it was not. After all, it had to be in here somewhere. If the ceiling wasn't its trick, that just meant it was something else. Something even more strange. Even more clever. She went to Daniel's room. She hadn't stopped checking on him at night, like she always had. This time, though, rather than opening the door, she listened at first, pressing her ear against the grain of the cheap wood and holding her breath, terrified that she would hear a skittering sound on the other side of the barrier. What she heard instead shocked her more. Daniel was talking to someone. Jamie recoiled for a second, then when she'd caught her breath, she all but kicked the door in. Daniel was already awake indeed, sitting up in bed, but he wasn't saying anything now. The light flashed on, and Jamie stalked halfway into the room before stopping, suddenly torn. What did she want more? To confirm that her son could speak again, or to find whomever he was speaking to? The creak of a door on its hinge settled the matter for her. She ran to the closet and threw it open. There was nothing inside, or at least nothing that shouldn't be there. She swept aside the clothes on the hangers, but nothing was hiding between them. Then she dragged the toy box out and emptied it onto the floor. Nothing. She combed along the bare walls and floor and, yes, the ceiling, pushing aside every last bit of rubbish and stray knickknacks so she could be sure, absolutely sure, that nothing was hiding. All the while Daniel watched her. After a few minutes, Jamie was panting and covered in sweat, and the closet was bare. There were neither intruders nor answers inside. It struck her as funny somehow, and she started to laugh, very quietly. She kicked her son's toys out of the way as she went to sit down on the bed, dazed. She became aware all at once of several things. First, that she had not slept in days, and was nowhere near her right mind. The second was how close she'd come to really losing it for good. Tomorrow, she decided, they would both sleep until the afternoon. And when they did wake up, she and Daniel would get out of this creaky old house. No more staying cooped up like prisoners, and no more checkups, and no more dreams about monsters. She would even take the bars off the windows. It was time to get back to living like real people again. It was time to... Jamie saw it when she brushed a hand through Daniel's hair. She pulled Daniel, a little too roughly, closer. Her son acquiesced to the examination without fidgeting or complaint, as Jamie pawed the side of his head, hoping that what she was seeing would somehow stop being apparent. She stared and stared until she ached from not blinking, but there was no denying what was right in front of her eyes. Daniel was missing an ear. No, she realized with mounting nausea. Both ears. There was no injury, no incision, no mark where they should have been. Simply smooth, blank flesh. As blank as Daniel's quiet, unperturbed demeanor. Jamie swept him up in her arms and ran into the hall. She was not sure where she was going, or what she meant to do when she got there. She just knew that there was now nothing more important than getting her son out of that house. But their path was cut off. A naked man sat in the hallway, with his back to them. No, not a man. Jamie recognized its stretched limbs and stooped shoulders. The pale thing squatted on its haunches, rocking back and forth like it was palsied. It almost seemed to be in pain. Jamie hugged her son closer and backed away. Then she heard Daniel's voice. "Mommy." Jamie turned to Daniel. Then she heard the voice again.
Mom-y.
But Daniel's lips hadn't moved. Jamie looked back at the hunched figure. Its head jerked when it talked, like a tick.
Hello, Mom-y.
Jamie's mouth went dry. It took several tries before she could speak. Don't call me that.
It is this voice's name for you.
Go away. Leave my family alone.
But I am your family.
The longer it talked, the more the voice became distorted and blurred. An icy feeling nestled in Jamie's stomach. Who are you?
Someone who came to visit.
Why here?
You invited me.
Jamie's heart thudded against the inside of her chest. Why?
I had something you wanted.
Jamie licked her dry lips. You're lying. You don't have anything I want. I want you to leave. Leave and never come back.
Who is Daniel's father?
Jamie blinked. What?
Who is Daniel's father?
What the hell kind of question is that?
How old is Daniel?
Jamie blinked again. The thing's voice caused a pinching pain in the center of her forehead. Stop asking me these things.
When is Daniel's birthday?
I don't know.
What is his middle name?
Shut up.
What was his first word?
I said shut up! Jamie wanted to tear the thing apart with her bare hands. Only the heaviness of Daniel in her arms kept her where she was.
You were alone. You wanted a son, so I made one for you.
Jamie's hands began to shake. That doesn't make sense. Made out of what?
Out of myself.
Jamie's stomach turned over.
But now I need those parts back.
Daniel picked at Jamie's shoulder, trying to get her attention. Something was strange about Daniel's face. Danny? Open your eyes! Daniel scrunched his eyes shut tighter. Open your eyes. Danny? Danny, open your eyes! Open your eyes! Daniel shook his head, trying to refuse, but he couldn't hold it forever. Eventually his eyelids flicked up and Jamie saw the truth. Daniel's eyes were gone. Jamie almost dropped him. For a second she wanted to throw her son down so that she could stop looking into those empty holes in his face. Daniel opened his mouth as if to speak, but of course he had no voice.
He is coming back to be part of me again.
No. No, 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 no. Give him back. Give him back.
I cannot. It has been too long. I warned you. This would happen.
You're lying. You're lying. You're a fucking liar. Give me my son back. Give him back.
I do not lie. I warned you. He could not exist forever. But you do not remember. You can only remember what I want you to. You forget all the times we have talked.
Daniel felt like a doll, or an empty bag. His hair was falling out, disappearing before it touched the ground. His hands vanished into his sleeves, and his feet rolled up inside his pant cuffs. Jamie cradled the tiny, shapeless thing. Tears streamed down her face. Soon she held a pile of empty clothes, and then those too were gone. She looked around the house. Toys disappeared. Photos vanished from their frames. Daniel's little shoes were no longer by the door. Jamie turned toward Daniel's room and confronted a wall where the door should be. She groped the blank surface, fingertips scrambling. She hit her head against the wall. The pain didn't feel real. Why did you do this?
It was what you wanted, and I learned so much.
This is impossible. People will ask, people will wonder. The police, the hospitals, the people in the neighborhood.
They have already forgotten him. They only remembered what I wanted them to, like you.
Jamie pressed her hands to her aching skull. Will I at least remember him after this?
You can try, but your mind will fail you. Now that everything he was is part of me again.
Jamie sat on the floor, looking at the blank wall. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the thing creep toward her and felt its wet hand on her shoulder, but she did not look at it. If I won't remember any of this, she said, then why tell me?
Because a mother should know.
And then Jamie was alone. Gail worried about Jamie sometimes. When they met a year ago, she said that she'd never been married and she'd never had kids. But there was a certain pained expression she assumed whenever she said that last part. Gail knew that look. He'd met parents who lost children before. You learned to recognize it. And there were other things about her that worried him too. Sometimes he would find her staring at a particular spot on the wall, brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't seem to realize she was doing it. And of course, there was the insomnia and the sleepwalking to consider too. Yes, there was lots to worry about, but he loved her all the same. Jamie still said she'd never had kids, and neither had he. He'd long wanted one, but it was impossible, and he worried that Jamie wouldn't stay with a man who couldn't give her a child, though she constantly assured him that it wasn't so. There were times, and more often they were nights, when Jamie took to sleepwalking, and even Gail imagined that he heard strange and scuttling noises in the house, and saw impossible shapes in dark corners. When he thought he would do anything, absolutely anything, if it meant having a little daughter for him and Jamie to raise. And at those moments, he became truly afraid. But he never knew why.